Day 4 of our 14 days with Katherine of Aragon, and today we're going to think about her engagement and eventual marriage to Prince Arthur. Now, as I've mentioned, I want this focus to be as much on Katherine as humanly possible. So I'm not going to talk too much about political negotiations around the marriage. I'm not going to talk too much about the to and fro between Henry and Ferdinand. I have spoken about that quite a bit in my 118 series, so go back to those early years if you want to know a bit more about that. Negotiations for her marriage to Prince Arthur began in 1487, so when she was just 2 years old, and these obviously went back and forth. There was also some discussion during this time whether she may actually instead marry James IV of Scotland, but obviously that came to nothing. In 1499 it was agreed that they would marry, but that they needed to wait until Arthur was 14 years of age. In 1499 there was a proxy wedding, sort of a mock stand-in wedding that meant they were married, but it hadn't been kind of done completely officially yet. So there was this kind of mock wedding, and the Spanish ambassador in London stood in for Katherine. And then it's at this point that we see Katherine and Arthur starting to send each other letters and seemingly become reasonably interested in each other, affectionate. Serious negotiations and preparations start taking place in 1501 for her to make the move to England to do the marriage properly as such. But several things delay the travelling, one being concerns about plague that's broken out. There's concerns over her mother's health, Isabella's health. Her mother is really sad to see her go. She's her youngest daughter, so those last months with her were quite melancholy. There's also concerns, again, go back and watch my early 118 videos if you want to know more about the Yorkist pretenders. Perkin Warbeck is just causing trouble here, there and everywhere at this point. So there's concerns about what's going on there. So for several reasons, it's kind of delayed. Eventually, on the 2nd of October in 1501, she lands at Plymouth after quite a difficult journey, and she's greeted by a huge crowd. People are so excited to see her. She has a really welcome greeting, and she does actually arrive a little bit earlier than expected, which kind of takes Henry by surprise, Henry VII. She starts to make her way towards London, but her future father-in-law and future husband sort of surprise her, intercept her along the way, and it's realised that she and Arthur can't really communicate all that well. They both know Latin, but they both know kind of different styles of Latin, so bishops have to sort of act as translators for them. So that's a little bit of a disappointment. But then she carries on her way to London. So on the 12th of November, that's when she makes her formal entrance into London. And I've talked about these a few times, but that's when we see these incredible pageants. And for me, this would be one of my top 5 at least moments in time that I would go back and see. There were various pageants around London, including places like London Bridge, that she progressed through, and they were astrological and mythological and relating to King Arthur and about prophecy, and there was a real focus on how these two coming together was ordained by the stars. There were references to her ancestor, King Alfonso, who was known as the astronomer king, and they talk about how their representative stars are adjacent to each other in the sky. So a real kind of oomph given to this marriage, with this idea that it's been foretold and written in the stars. The afternoon before the wedding, she meets and spends time with her new mother-in-law, Elizabeth of York. And then the next day, on the 14th of November, she arrives at St Paul's Cathedral, and she is wearing a silk veil that comes all the way down to her waist. And she's wearing a white dress embroidered with gold and jewels. Two quite interesting facts about the wedding. One, she was walked down the aisle. Her father wasn't there, Ferdinand wasn't there, so she was walked down the aisle by the then 10-year-old Prince Henry, so the future Henry VIII. She was walked down the aisle by him, which is very interesting foreshadowing, I think. And also, I've only read this in one place, and I hope it's true because I find it quite amusing, that apparently at the wedding banquet she sat with King Henry VII, and poor Arthur had to sit at the children's table with his siblings. There then followed 10 days of banquets and tournaments, and later in her life Catherine had made the point that all that seems to happen here is constant feasting and banquets. Catherine's retinue left her on the 20th of November, and then there was some disagreement between the parents as to whether she should go to Ludlow with Prince Arthur or whether she should stay in London for a little while, because they didn't want the consummation of the marriage to happen too early on, for various reasons and various beliefs about what might affect fertility. But Henry VII in the end had the final say, and off she went to Ludlow with her new husband. They head to Ludlow on the 21st of December 1501, and we will leave them there for the meantime. But just one last thing to point out there is that when she's there, she makes the acquaintance of Lady Margaret Pole, who I'm sure you've heard of, and she becomes a lifelong friend to her. So there you go. Catherine is now married, and we will catch up with her tomorrow and see how things are going with Arthur. I'll see you then.